You can see here, I'm working with the Janet. I had cut her right before the Christmas break into a long, curly, razored shape. I wanted to now take the same haircut and go into a short, curly, rounded bob. So when working with curly hair, some of the most important things are the preparation. So I started to prep the hair with Goldwell Curl and Wave Serum. This hydrating serum is my favorite to cut, especially curly hair with. And then I'm using my Tangle Tamer from Denman. I'm gonna be working with the razor, so I'm gonna be working on the hair damp. So it's very important that the hair is detangled, easy to work with. I'm gonna be working in a technical way. Look at how beautiful that goes through the hair. And I'm gonna use a series of different Denman brushes to prepare the curl as we get into styling. This is a great one. It comes from their classic line, and it's got less teeth than perhaps what you're familiar with, so a wider space. Also great to prepare and separate and identify that curl pattern. Okay, I'm gonna come in here now. I'll start off working with the feather styling razor. This is the short-handled detail razor, which is probably one of the most popular types of razors there is. And you can see I'm starting right next to the face because the shape is going to be round. So I want to start at the shortest point, which is right here at the front. It's going to be a shorter bob. I come through with the fine teeth of the comb, and I want to get a nice, even tension on the hair. Now, cutting hair, curly hair with tension obviously takes a lot of experience because it's going to jump. So, what I recommend is if you're unfamiliar with the hair, practice maybe something a little bit longer at first to see how it's going to react. So down here, I'm just going to take a little bit of the length off. You can see where my hands are, and you can see where the length is. So it's with the amount of dampness that's in the hair, it jumps up about an inch, this particular texture. And you'll have to keep your eye on that because the texture might not be completely consistent everywhere. So I want this to maybe be right by the chin. So I'm going to keep my fingers about an inch below the chin. I'm cutting with the edge of the blade and in a very small stroke to start off with. So we're just getting a slightly irregular line, but not a lot of scraping or thinning. Again, using the razor, one of my favorite things to do, but just like anything, there's a lot of understanding that goes into it. It's not just using a razor, it's how you use the razor, okay? Combing that hair down, nice even tension with the fine teeth of the comb. Now, I don't want a lot of graduation on my bob, okay? If I was to continue with this tension, cutting right on the same guideline, you're gonna see a lot of roundness in the bob. So you see what I do? I go past the guide about a comb's thickness, and I open my stroke just a tiny bit more than the first time. So what this will do, it's almost a reverse graduation in a way. So by giving each section a little bit more length over the previous section, it's not gonna completely round away, which is also a beautiful look. It's just not the look I'm going for here at the moment. I'm gonna take my section now curving all the way from the parting. Janet had some bangs here from the last haircut that we did before the break. And if you saw that, or if you wanna go back and see it, it's here on our Facebook page under our live button. You can check out all of our Facebook lives and you can see Janet, the beautiful length and texture that she has for working with curly hair. So she's got some existing kind of face framing from the last haircut. I'm gonna keep that for now. I'm gonna focus on the line. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna comb down, good even tension. I'm gonna look for the line. I'm gonna give myself a little bit of space, and I'm gonna open my stroke just a little bit more than the previous. Really cutting from the side of the hair. So they're clean yet soft cuts. I call that edge cutting. If you wanna learn more about razor cutting and the philosophy that I have of really understanding the rotations of the blade, the different strokes in the blade, check out Razorcraft at hblive.me. That's our online academy. We've got lots of great stuff there. And there are actually tons of great razor classes, not just from me, but from some of the best razor cutters out there. So my section's again now curving this way. So my section's gently changed. They worked horizontal diagonal back up until the round of the head, and now they're curving with the natural fall in a very organic way. Not a ton of length here, but we're starting to get into an area where this could start to get heavy, right? So I'm gonna first lock my fingers in where I want them. I find the length, I give myself some separation. Now I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna use the edge of the blade on the side here to kind of remove some channels of weight. Again, not flat down, but putting in just a few kind of invisible layers, literally on top of the surface there. Here on the front, you can see I'm meeting the face frame. So I change my finger position and change the angle. What I don't change is the rotation of the blade. I'm using the edge of the blade for the whole shape. Last section, see if any of this length even reaches. Very, very small amount reaches. Come down, get your fingers in place. Again, using what I like to call the slicing technique. And just putting some invisible layering in there. And then again, giving myself some distance from the guideline. You know, that's kind of more of an art than a science, figuring out how much space you need to give yourself from the guideline. Again, if I was to cut everything right on the guideline with that tension, you would see a lot of graduation here, a lot. Okay, we're gonna come into the back now. Now, again, as I was mentioning, the preparation of the hair. You know, with type 4 hair or, you know, highly textured, highly curly hair, you know, you don't want to just be like twisting it up and putting a ton of pins in it because it's just going to get tangly and hard to control. So I did a little pre-detangling, and then rather than twisting it all up, I kind of loosely went with the curl pattern. Again, every time I drop one of these down, I'm going to mist it with some of the Curl and Wave serum from our friends at Goldwell. I'm going to first use the Tangle Tamer from Denman, and I'm going to earn my way to the roots, as my good friend Pakil O'Reilly says and taught me. Start at the ends. Hold here so you're not pulling too much on the root, and earn your way through until you can comb all the way through nicely. And again, I find that this, it's a classic Denman brush. It's from the D series. This gives a nice separation to the curls to really kind of help me visualize where we want to go. So I want to kind of come down here on a rounded angle. I'm going to come back to my guideline. Tilt the head away from me slightly, just readjust. I think I might need to bring her up a little higher because the hairline's lower than me. Great tripods here from our friends at Pivot Point. You know, again, it's really hard to teach on bad tripods. It's the only way I can say it. So, you know, a lot of people are investing in online courses. They're investing in having great educators come into them. And if you don't have a good tripod, it really makes it difficult. So I really suggest you check out this. It's called the Universal Tripod from Pivot Point. Amazing.
Anna C.G. Smith is here with us, and she was wondering about the comb that you're using.
Yeah, this is the Tough 20. It's my favorite cutting comb, especially for razor cutting. It's a carbon comb, so it's nice and rigid, so it doesn't have a lot of give to it. It really helps me see exactly what I'm doing. So again, remember where my fingers were here. Now I need to visualize where that's going to come into the back and also give myself room for shrinkage. So again, if you saw from the beginning, I can test the hair out first. I've got a good even tension on it, and I'm going to take a little bit of a lot of the length off here. It's ultimately going to be shorter than this, but I want to see how much it shrinks. And again here, the curl is consistent. It is a mannequin, you know, the hair is all consistent everywhere. And it shrunk up about 1 inch, which is the same as it did on the sides. And you know, you always need to be aware of that. So if I want this to sit in right about here, I'm going to give myself 1 inch distance. So that shrinkage factor, since I'm working with tension. Now, not to say that you always have to work with tension. Sometimes you can work free form, you can work on dry hair, which I do a lot. I don't think there are any good or bad or right or wrong ways. If it looks great and your client is happy and you can replicate it, then it's a great technique. But for me, when I work with the razor, with the blade, I like some dampness in the hair. And in this case, the hair is not soaking wet. It is just kind of really liberally damp from the actual serum that I used. Coming through, giving myself a little space from the guide. That allows for the shrinkage and to make sure that it doesn't end up incredibly graduated looking, which is very typical with a razor and very typical with curly hair. So it's kind of a reverse graduation, just a subtle one. I mean, you could actually always go more extreme. You can do everything more extreme. But I'm just going past the guide about a comb's thickness each time. And then as I get up into the density of the hair, I start to remove some weight. So the back gets thicker pretty quick. So I'll probably start to remove some weight in this section right now. So I come through, I set my fingers up, past the guide, and we're coming in and we're using the slicing technique, just every inch or so. Be very cautious, but that's gonna start to put like a kind of a form of invisible layering in the hair. Now this area, I'm not gonna take any weight out because I don't wanna make any holes. I'm going to actually kind of, I'll even, because this area probably shrinks the most, I'll do a test again. I'll take a little bit of hair off and see how much it shrinks. Right, obviously there's still plenty of room to work. And this is such a crucial area, I can just take a little bit at a time. Using the feather detail razor, this is a guarded razor with the short handle. I love the short handle. Look at that, almost there. I could even at this point just freeform some of this. Just to be extra cautious, because once we get a hole here, we can't do nothing about it. And I'm not opposed to even switching to my shear or my scissor for a minute. I combine the two all the time, using point cutting and being very, very gentle. Now that might be overly cautious. I probably could have managed this technically, but why not? And it's also helping me get a good balance with the side. A little bit of checking here. And rounding. Okay, gonna continue up the back. Anytime I feel like it's tangly, I'll get out some of my Denman brushes and really work on the tangle. But I think, because I prepared the hair and I really took my time, I think I'm safe here. So again, tension, giving myself some room past the original guide. Each time you have to go past a little bit more. And again, that's more of an art than a science. And then also just putting a little bit of slicing in there. And opening the stroke just a little bit more. And visually looking to make sure we're not getting extreme kind of graduation happening here. Trying to limit that. We want kind of a weighty looking curly bob. I feel like I can take some weight out here and here, but maybe not here. And again, I'll give myself some space. So it's interesting to not cut right on a guideline. I know we're so trained in that in classic haircutting, but to use every previous guideline as a reference point and then perhaps kind of change what you're doing each time is an interesting thing for sure. And as I said, if we want to get different results, sometimes we have to do different things. Okay, continue working up the back. Sections are curved with the head shape. So very simple sectioning, simple cutting. It's just really being involved with the hair and understanding the hair. Okay, if I start to get a little tangly, maybe that hair's dried off a little too much on the tips, a light mist with my Curl and Wave serum from Goldwell, and then working through with the Tangle Tamer from our friends at Denman. Happy to start working with Denman this year. Denman's a legendary brand. I don't think there's any hairdresser out there that doesn't have a Denman brush. But I think that there's so much more to them than we think. It's not just about blow drying hair perfectly straight. They are great for working with texture. So again, putting a little bit in. Now where you go is obviously very important. I'm not going too close to the root here and giving myself plenty of room. And as I open my stroke down here, I look to see what's happening. That's just putting a little space in the curl, a little air in the curl, and letting it develop. Very careful in this area. I have been all along. So maybe my slicing will be closer to the ends of the hair, and then giving myself some room down here. You're always going to get, some, especially with, with some of the previous shape that was in here, you're going to get some irregularities on your line. Start to play with it with your fingers. You can kind of take little bits off with the blade, or you can switch to the scissor. But ultimately, we're looking for this nice roundness. and the fact that we're not getting a very stacked looking graduation. If I wasn't going past my finger, past the guide a little bit each time, this would look very, very different. Just from the tension and from the act of the blade. You know, those of you that are familiar with razor cutting know how easy it is to create beautiful graduation with the razor. So it's actually kind of hard to not create graduation. Going past the guide each time. And as I say, it's more of an art than a science. You have to look at it. You have to think, how open is my stroke going to be? And how far past the guide do I need to go?
We have a question about when you're saying cutting it past the guideline.
Yep. I'm literally going past the guideline. So each section that's been cut, the next section is cut a little bit longer. People maybe called that undercutting in the past or reverse graduation. But when you're working with tension on very curly hair, it's a way of avoiding getting a lot of graduation.
And another term for graduation would be like
stacking.
Yes.
Stacking, if you don't know what graduation means. Last section. Again, if the hair is a little bit drier, and it is on the ends, I'm using the Goldwell. I live for this stuff. I love it. Thank you to our friends at Goldwell. Before the holidays, they invited us to a nice event where we were able to fill up with great products and tools. Tangle Tamer from Denman. And again, using tension, which can be a little bit scary.
Can you show us again how you...
How I what?
Oh, you were gonna...
Yeah, I'm gonna do a little bit of slicing here on the last, right kind of around the occipital area. Okay.
And can you show us how you decide to go? How much do you go past?
If that's the guide, I let it drop away. Now, as I keep saying, it's more of an art than a science. I started off about a comb's distance with a closed stroke, and as I open the stroke, I need to go further and further to make up for it. So the thing is that as you go up the back of the head, as your stroke gets deeper into the hair, you need to go a little bit past more than the previous section. And that's what, it's not something that's just going to come to you immediately. You're going to have to get a great mannequin here like a Janet. These are available from Pivot Point. Just go to Pivot Point online and you can look for fantastic mannequin and you can practice. I mean, look at that beautiful hair, that beautiful shape. If I was not going past the guide, this would look so graduated right now. You've got a little bit of roundness just because of the previous haircut, but you've got a nice weighted shape like so. If I was to do a cross check, not that you do cross checks very often on one length cuts, but you see how square that is? That's because each time I went past. If I was to not go past, the line of my fingers would be like that. Okay, looking at that profile, now looking from the front. I love that little shape, very simple. Now I've got a more advanced version of this that has some undercutting and some disconnection, and it's actually done with the scissor or the shear at hblive.me, which is our online academy. It's called the hybrid cut, where I'm working with different forms. I work with tension cutting, no tension cutting, working in very, very different ways with it. Okay, again, prepare the hair as we come to the second side. Tangle Tamer. And then my wide tooth Denman, which is great. And you'll see me when I go to apply product later, this is the brush that we want. As well as when it's long hair, look at that. Have you guys ever seen the Denman paddle brush like this? So if you go back and look at the last video that I did before the holiday break, we did a nice long layered razor here on Janet, razor cut. And it was, I use that paddle brush a lot in styling. Preparing those curls. Okay, so again, here's the tricky part. It's always tricky getting some kind of balance in the hair. And there's no guarantee that the hair on this side is going to shrink the same way it did on the other side. So I'm going to come through. I'm going to do a little test here if I can. Little test on the shrinkage here. Again, seem consistently to shrink up about an inch past where I cut it when it was still damp. And I want to come back here and I want to look at where, now this is starting to dry off, which is actually kind of a good thing because I can really see my line as it's starting to dry is about the tip of the nose to the corner of the jaw. So I can use that on this side as a reference as I come through. A little bit more off. Not taking too much weight out in these initial sections. So you'll see I'm just working on the line, not working on any of the internal shape. Okay, let that shrink, let it dry. Tip of the nose coming through. Okay, I think I'm on track. All right, I want to show you guys something else I'm really excited about. As you know, normally I use an unguarded razor and I use the feather plie, which is the, the all-time standard and great razor cutting. We have done a little collab with our friends at Feather on the feather plie. Come in here and as you can see that, we've got our little Hairbrain Pro logo engraved here beautifully. So if you love the feather plie and you want to support Hairbrain, check out the Hairbrain Pro feather plie collab. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to load a blade in here. I'm going to switch a little bit for my friends out there that love straight razor cutting or unguarded blade. Now, I mean, the difference for me here is that I'm going to get a lot more connectivity to the hair. As you can see, I can cut with a guarded blade. Everyone can cut well with a guarded blade. But the unguarded blade, if you have the discipline and the control, you can really just feel that hair. You can get so much feedback and so much really connectivity with the hair. Okay, so here's a great point where I can show you how I start to go past the guide. I come down, I see the guide. Almost always on the first one, I go a comb's thickness past. There's my guide, there's my fingers. And my stroke gets a little bit more open, just a little bit. So I get a little bit more softness and texture on the line. It doesn't have to, you can do a really, really solid line as well. Okay, as I start to get up into this area, I'm gonna start to think about the fringe. I'm gonna curve my fingers around, my section around to include the fringe.
Joy, can you address the myth about razor cutting on curly hair? Andy's here, she said she's heard that it damages it. Some people are saying it causes frizz. What are your thoughts on this with the razor and the...
I've had lots of great success. I've been a hairdresser for 30 years. I've worked with the razor on curly hair many, many times. It's, bleach causes damage and so does color, but it's not about that. It's about who's using it and how they're using it. So we don't say, scissors can cause damage. Scissors can be bad for hair. Again, if you take the time to educate yourself and learn about how to work with the tool, maybe you'll feel differently, maybe you won't. That's the beauty of our craft. What I can tell you is, if you want to razor curly hair and you want to do it as safely as possible in terms of the texture, or if you want to razor any hair as safely as possible, start by mastering what we call edge cutting. That's when the blade is on a T with the hair, like so, T with the fingers. You don't come down flat like so, you're coming across and you're cutting section by section. If you start to practice that and understand it, then perhaps you'll have good results, perhaps you won't. So I recommend you try for yourself. Don't, following rules that someone else created is called dogma, and that's really bad for everyone.
Well, and you also want to think about how sharp is your blade.
Of course, without a doubt. If you've got a dull blade, you're going to pull, you're going to snag the hair, But again, I'm not here to try to convince you. If you think that razor cutting is bad, then don't do it. Then, limit yourself. Or if you think, hey, I've heard it's bad, but I'm interested, then, get some great mannequins, get some great courses and try for yourself. There's so many things over the years that I've tried. Some of them I like and I continue to do. Others I don't like and I don't do them again. But I don't let someone else tell me, I have to find out for myself. I really believe that that's an important thing to do. And how do you do that? You do that by practicing. That's what this whole series is about. It's called Professionals Who Practice. So, again, if you're at that point where maybe you've heard this or you've heard that, you want to find out for yourself, check out this mannequin. I mean, you're not going to get a better head of hair to practice and learn on. This is the Janet from Pivot Point. Find out for yourself. Follow along with this video or go to hblive.me maybe you'll find that, hey, I just like to razor straight hair. And you know what? That's good. If it works for you, works for your clients, great. Maybe you're like, I love razoring curly hair. I'm going to do it all the time. It's all about the individual. Don't get stuck up in someone else's reality. A long time ago, someone told me the term fear, what it stood for hairdressers, was false education acting as reality. Fear, false education as reality. And unfortunately that happens. Don't do this, don't do that, don't think about this, don't think about that. I don't want to be that guy, and I don't think you do either. All right, so again, as we're coming through the back here, we're thinking about where that line is headed. I'm gonna, again, check. So because I have the luxury of some hair to work with here, so here you can clearly see edge cutting. I'm cutting from the side of the hair. So you can look at it and you can see the type of cut. If you don't want to work with a razor, there's plenty of ways to work with a scissor that are similar. Sometimes people do what they call chop cutting, where they hold it and they use, it's all about you and what works for you and your guest. So same here, I could just see the same amount of kind of retraction in the curl. So I'm going to go about 1 inch past where I want this to be. And come in and see if it's sitting right in at the base of the hairline. I can do a little pinching here in the center. The blade is a little flatter there, just because I was just trimming a little bit off, tiny little bit off the ends of the hair. All right, I'm gonna continue to work my way up. Now this section's been, kind of curled up for a while, and it could be kind of tangly. So this is where I close the blade, because this is where even a very experienced razor cutter can cut themselves. This is where I start to close the blade. I've got a section now that curves all the way through. Get this out of the way. Make sure this hair is nicely detangled before I start addressing it. Using my Tangle Tamer from Denman. And working into the hair. So again, we've got this area here that we want to be really mindful of. I'm not going to jump right into that. I'm going to work here. This also needs just a little bit of water, a little H2O. Just dried off a little bit more than the previous. Coming through. Now this is where I find my guide. And I give myself some space past that guide. And I open the stroke a little bit more. Coming in here. A little bit past my guide, turning, if you're very comfortable with the razor, you can cut with the back of the blade or the front of the blade. Okay, this is where we want to be very cautious of shrinkage. So again, I'm just playing, see how much comes off. Because there's no hair underneath here. Hair's like Velcro. So if there's no hair underneath here, it's got a lot of room to shrink. And that's what I did on the other side. And then I came in with my shear. I combine cutting all the time. To me, it's all about the end result. A lot of ways to get there. And if it looks great when you're done, none of it is bad. Okay, so we've made sure, I didn't want to put a lot of tension there because, one little mistake and it's going to just create a hole. Coming up again. All right, I'm going to address this hair because it's been sitting a long time. I'm going to revamp it with the Goldwell Curl and Wave Serum. I've used this product a lot and I know you can't use too much. I'm going to work my way through, earn my way back to the roots again. So I don't want to keep dealing with this hair being kind of challenging. I can kind of reorganize the curl. Like so. Sections curving through from the front into the center back. This is where I started to take weight out using the slicing technique on the first side. So we're going to do the same here. Not necessarily here yet. We want to be real careful right in that area behind the ear. I want to come through. I want to see where my fingers are. I want to go past it. And I want to give myself some room. Now you don't want to do too much of this. And you also don't want to do a lot of what they call tipping. because then you're going to get a lot of irregularities in the curl. I'm just being more definite. There's a few little pieces here and there that will help the hair to just be a little bit leaner, flatter to the head, or vice versa, could give it a little more volume if you kind of flip the head upside down and go for that type of look. So fingers going past the previous line, opening the stroke, looking at it, balancing it with the other side. Again, I wish I could tell you exactly every time how far to go past the previous, but you kind of have to feel it. You kind of have to look at, you know, how it's building, how much weight you want, how much you don't want, and you have to be real gentle with it. I'll be gentle here again. Look at how much room I'm giving myself for shrinkage. And then sometimes I can even just work with it a curl at a time. Coming in from the side of the hair. So notice how the blade's not flat on the hair. And working my way in. And then I can even finish that off. So being extra safe here. Again, I probably could have just used tension and did it as you know, but I just want to show you, especially if you're just kind of maybe not super familiar with using tension on curly hair, this can help you. Just to make sure, because once it's gone, you can't put it back unless you do some extensions. And that takes time and money and kind of, you know, might not be what you want to do. Oh, I cut too much, let's put in some extensions. Maybe not a great way to build your business. All right, working here again with the brand new HB Pro Feather Plie razor. So, you know, there are a lot of razors out there, but pretty much anyone will tell you, I mean, that the standard of great razor cutting is the Feather Plie. And, you know, so we just decided, hey, let's just brand it. We did like a little Supreme number, like a collab, where we worked with them and we just kind of brand it. So if you know quality and you want a great razor, you'll have to check this out. All right, I feel like I have enough of an underneath that I can come into this area now. Make sure you're going past the guide. And again, working my way through. So I come through, I see the hair, the previous hair is dropping away. Right now, I'm probably 3/4 of an inch longer than the very first section that I cut. And that is what is preventing a real extreme stacking, which was, you know, kind of what I was going for here. And then, you know, I may layer the hair a little bit more after I get all this in, but what I didn't want was a very, very super graduated looking haircut. And, you know, that's a subtle thing because, you know, it definitely, if I wanted it even less rounded than this, I'd give myself probably even more distance between each section. But then at a certain point, it just becomes a bit kind of...
shapeless?
Yeah, it can. It really can. Thank you, Kelly. Past the guide. Look where I am now compared to where I started. Some slicing. Now, you know, again, the other thing about if you go really past it, what if she blows it out straight? You know, if you blow this out straight, because it's not going to look strange. You're just a little bit past the guide each time. You know, from the very beginning to almost the last section, it's almost about an inch. And then there's texture removed, and I'll even kind of do a little bit more. So this could be worn in multiple ways. If I go extremely past the guide every time, I'm not really sure that would work. Could start to get a little bit weird. Final section here of the basic line, and then we'll just do a little bit of more weight removal. So again, if you remember where my first section was, where my fingers are, look at where they are now. I feel comfortable putting some slicing in here now. Taking that away. Always thinking about the rounded line with the angle of my fingers. Giving that hair some room. Okay, so I've got all that off. I want to redamp the hair one more time and just use a slightly different technique where I actually elevate and take a little bit of slicing into the hair. So I'm going to prepare. It's going to be very important to be able to get through the hair well. So I've redamped it. I'm using my Denman kind of wide spacing. This is awesome for working with curly hair, cutting and styling. Great way to get separation in the curl. And right now I'm using it to make sure that I can comb through the hair beautifully. Because what I want to do now is kind of come through vertically. And do just a little bit of slicing in here this way. Very, very gentle. But just, you know.
Why vertically?
It's just it gives me a different perspective on the weight removal, and I can see if maybe the top got a little bit too heavy from the reverse graduation. If some of those pieces are maybe very, very dramatic, this will kind of air them out. Really working on the top, from the top of the ear to the crown here. You know, and this is optional. I just want a little more space in the hair. Very, very gentle. You could be much more aggressive than that, but that's not what I'm going for. I'm going to bring that all the way around the head, like wagon wheel style. Same body position, all the way through. This is where the hair is thickest. So I'll go in a little bit more close together. Pivoting. And I'm just working all the way straight out on base. Obviously you could play with different over directions, different elevations. I'm not lifting this straight up to the ceiling. I don't want to take that much weight out. So I'm just bringing it out more parallel with the floor. And you can see just getting a little bit of airiness in the ends of the hair. Just, you know, so it doesn't ever look like, oh, that one's longer than that one. It just gives you a little bit of openness and airiness. There we go. Trying to stay consistent with that weight removal. That can also be hard, you know? Sometimes we tend to take, we start off heavy-handed and we get lighter and lighter. That happens a lot. Switching to the shear as his hair begins to dry a little bit naturally, doing some detail. A couple of the curls over here, maybe a little bit looser than the ones around them. Let's just get in front. Let's see her this way. It's not unusual for hair like right next to the face to maybe be a little bit different. So letting it kind of fall forward. At this stage though, you know, if you need to cut a lot off, maybe something kind of went a little bit askew in the technique. You know, don't beat yourself up about it. Just try to figure out what might have happened. A little bit of back cutting on these ends so that I don't get blunt ends. So just kind of grabbing and using the blade a little bit in almost like a teasing motion. Moving that hair around. You know, if some of the curls pop out a little bit more than we want, we can tame them. Again, very small amounts are coming off here. It's a real refinement. Tilt the head back a little. Okay, next I'm going to apply a little bit of the foam wrap from Mizani. It's my favorite to work with on really highly textured hair that we're going to dry naturally. You know, in this case, I'm just going to apply the product and let the hair just air dry beautifully. Now, I'm going to go back to the original idea of kind of working in quadrants and applying this very liberally to this first quadrant. And again, now this is, again, where this Denman brush, this wide tooth, detangling, styling Denman brush from the classic series is going to be amazing. This is really going to start to make these curls do exactly what they want to do. It's creating that perfect separation. And of course, thoroughly saturating the product 360 degrees around the hair shaft. Working into the back, Mizani foam wrap. You know, I'm super fortunate hairdresser. You know, through Hairbrained, we have relationships with all the best beauty brands, pro beauty brands in the world, tool manufacturers, styling companies, education companies. And, you know, that's what you're seeing here as a result of that. You know, working with all of these great tools, experimenting, practicing, very much as this series that we've done now probably for 5 years. You know, I didn't have this Denman brush, I don't know, 6 weeks ago. Denman sent me this great little package. And I started playing around with stuff. You know, I read some of their history, some of their stories. And again, if you've got the right hair, like you've got here on a beautiful pivot point mannequin, I mean, wow. Look at that. The product, the styling. I can't encourage you enough. Can't encourage you too much to get yourself some mannequins. You know, there's nothing like the day when that pivot point box shows up and I start planning what I want to practice, what I want to try, what I want to teach. And now with the expansion of this particular line of textured hair, the Janet I've been using a lot because she's very kind of cost effective and realistic, but they've got so much variation now. I think there's at least 5 different highly textured, different types of curls. There's even one that has 4 different curl patterns on one head. Now think about the cutting lesson that you could do there. You know, the practice that you can really kind of do, and the styling, because the great thing about these is they can all be styled. I've taken this and blown it straight. Probably, you know, hard work, no doubt, but that's what taking curly hair and blow drying it straight is. But it was a very great lesson for me and great practice. Okay, again, working that foam wrap in and really getting it through the hair with the wide tooth brush. Now again, I'm gonna let this just dry naturally. And that's just kind of what I'm into right now. And I have a sleeping dog, so I don't want to turn on the blow dryer. But what would I do? I would just kind of hold, if I wanted to. Really, if I was in the salon, I would put her under heat, like under the heat lamp, or you know, you could put a hairnet, and you could put her under a traditional dryer. Anything like that would work. And if not, you can always, of course, use a diffuser very, very gently. And there you have it, a nice curly rounded bob on the beautiful Janet, cut with the razor, you know, challenging some conventions there, and then styled using some beautiful foam wrap. I want to thank our friends at Pivot Point for their continued support and for making these incredible tripods, incredible mannequins, and being, you know, such a big part of, you know, the legacy of education. I believe it's the 60th year that Pivot Point's been doing what they're doing, you know, and started by a hairdresser, still run by the family. That's something admirable, something that I, you know, hope to achieve with Hairbrained. Maybe 60 years from now, we'll be able to say, look at the mark we've made on the industry. Well, we're in good company. All right, guys, thank you and peace out.